Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a Star Trek news podcast presented by TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on November 7th, 2025, and is current through Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in the Alex Kurtzman era of Star Trek with the 12th television show currently in production and 14 movies to enjoy, and merchandise continuing to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me and I'll help you sort the real facts from lots of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest Caleb Dorsch. Caleb, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Hey, Alex. Happy to have beamed aboard. This is exciting. A lot of good stories this week.
All right, Caleb. Well, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
All right. So for me this week, it's got to be this Enterprise rewatch that I am well deep into the first season of.
Okay.
And I am absolutely loving this first season on rewatch. A lot more than I did the first time. It's definitely a very underrated season, and I think a lot of episodes have grown on me as we're going through. Just the last couple of nights, I finished Acquisition, which was awesome. You know, you've got this three-peat of Clint Howard and Ethan Phillips and Jeffrey Combs as Ferengi, and they were all pretty hilarious. And I loved how Archer was, you know, manipulating Jeffrey Combs's Ferengi character. Krem, I think was his name. But it was just a good time. And then this whole scene with, you know, Trip and Archer pretending to sell off Trip's non-existent wife for gold bars and, you know, typical goofy early 2000s Enterprise stuff. And then Oasis, you know, Oasis is a totally unnecessary episode on paper. It's a retread of Shadow Play, which is an episode I really like from DS9, but
also starring Renee Auberjonois.
Exactly. And interestingly, though, the whole premise of that episode, you know, is that the crew, you know, actually perished in the shuttle. And it's just really interesting to watch it now because you have Annie Wershing and Renee Auberjonois, who both have since passed, and their characters they're the ones that matter the most in this story. And it just kind of is an interesting and bittersweet thing to watch, and had a very surreal factor to it this time. And so I really enjoyed it, even though I knew going into it, it wasn't the best of episodes. But as a whole, I'm really loving season one. Some of the things that annoyed me about Archer the first time through, I'm a little more relaxed on. You know, I thought that his own hubris and willingness to dive headfirst without actually thinking about consequences at all really bothered me a lot the first time I watched Enterprise. And now I'm like, you know what? It fits with where they're at in the story right now. And they are very green, and they don't know they're green, and they have to earn their stripes, so to speak. So it's really good. I'm excited to get through the last couple episodes of season one and into some more temporal Cold War shenanigans.
Yeah, I am a big fan of Enterprise season one, and I'm also a big fan of Acquisition. It's funny, it's one of those episodes where, I mean, that episode at the time, people hated it because it was like Enterprise is supposed to be this prequel show, and it's like, oh, you immediately go to the well of doing the Ferengi, but technically, you know, you're not supposed to have made first contact with the Ferengi, so like you have to go through the episode without saying the name, you know, so that it doesn't conflict with the canon at all. And like, I think a lot of people were so mad about the perceived kind of canon breaking of it all that they actually kind of overlooked that it's a great episode. It's exactly the same case, in fact, even more so with Regeneration, the Borg episode in season 2. Again, another one that people absolutely hated at the time because it was like, oh, you couldn't make it 2 seasons without doing a Borg episode after all the Borg episodes in Voyager. But Regeneration's great, and Acquisition's great too. And yeah, I mean, the whole season has so much about it that's very underrated. And yeah, I mean, I just love Enterprise generally, and I think it never got the credit that it deserved at the time. It is getting some of the credit that it deserves now. And for a lot of fans who are like, oh, I'm still not really interested in Enterprise, if you're saying that and you haven't watched it in 25 years, then worth a revisit.
Oh, absolutely. And, there's even some of the bigger episodes that everyone generally was pretty warm to, still hit pretty well. Broken Bow is obviously a fantastic pilot, and you get the whole Andorian incident and Shadows of Pajem two-hander over there at different points in the season, and there's just a lot of good stuff to pick up on. So definitely recommend checking out Enterprise Season 1 if you haven't watched it in a while. I'm having a lot of fun with it.
All right, let me give you what I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week. And this is the second Star Trek novel announcement in quite a while that has gotten me feeling intrigued as far as Star Trek novels go. So there is a Star Trek Picard novel coming early next year that's like set after the events of season 3, which I'm very pleased about and looking forward to. But the one that I am really jazzed by is they announced a new Deep Space Nine novel coming August 26th of next year, The Peacemakers by Una McCormack. And it's a Jake Sisko novel. And initially I was like, oh, okay, they've been doing a few Deep Space Nine novels and they're all set during the series. So like, what kind of like episodic Jake Sisko tale is this going to be this time? But actually, this one is set 5 years after the end of Deep Space Nine. And so it's a post-series novel, which is exciting because the novels have very carefully restricted themselves in the last 7 or 8 years since Star Trek came back to television to just telling stories set within the boundaries of the respective series. And these two novels next year, the Star Trek Picard novel, whose name I'm completely blanking on, and then this new Deep Space Nine novel, The Peacemakers, are the first novels that take that tentative step. That was the thing that I had always loved about the novels, which was that they were telling this wider story and filling in the gaps and giving you things about these characters that weren't just, hey, here's an episode of season 6 that you never watched. That, they were continuing the story for these characters forward. There's obviously some risk in that while they're making Star Trek, some of it which is perennially set during this time frame, though right now we don't have any 24th century Star Trek, because what if it contradicts it? But I still respect them taking the swing of doing it and would rather them do it and have it end up being contradicted than just them not do it at all. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be exciting.
That is really exciting. I didn't realize it was post-series either. So now you got me hooked. Definitely looking forward to the other one too. To Defy Fate, I think is the title of
that one. Yes, that's right.
One.
That's right.
But definitely I love Jake Sisko, and one of my favorite Deep Space Nine novels from the relaunch is Rising Sun, which I thought was just a really fun adventure that actually had a lot of weight to it. There's a whole Kaiopaka thing going on there, and that was a lot of fun. And so I'm excited to see where they decide to take this version of Jake Sisko. That's really intriguing.
All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, in a wide-ranging article about the current state of Paramount Global since it was bought and merged with Skydance Entertainment earlier this year, it appears that the future of Star Trek at the movies will not include a return for Chris Pine and the rest of the Kelvin timeline crew. In discussing the studio's attempts to revitalize its movie business, the article says, quote, despite disagreements over strategy, there is a shared sense of urgency around the need to fundamentally transform Paramount as the new executive leadership recognizes it must move fast to pull off its grand plans. In addition to signing talent deals with folks like Matt and Ross Duffer, the brothers behind Netflix's Stranger Things, the team is trying to assemble a slate of films that can attract audiences to theaters at a time when the box office is in a slump. Ellison personally courted a complete unknowns, James Mangold, and is shelling out up to $100 million to produce High Side, a motocross thriller that will be the director's next film with Timothée Chalamet. Insiders at Paramount insist that the film will cost less and no official budget has been set. Some long gestating productions, such as Miles Teller's sports drama Winter Games, have been put into turnaround, while there has also been a focus on reinvigorating certain franchises. The hope is to have a fresh Star Trek movie, though the studio has moved on from the idea of bringing back Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, and the rest of the ensemble from the J.J. Abrams reboot. It is also working on sequels to Top Gun and Days of Thunder, with the film's star, Tom Cruise, recently visiting the Paramount lot to congratulate the Skydance team on its takeover and to discuss a return to those franchises and other possible collaborations. Since the corporate takeover, there has been no official news about Star Trek movies beyond it being a priority franchise for the studio, and there's been no additional word about the Star Trek Origin movie that was discussed last year from Andor director Toby Haynes and writer Seth Graham-Smith. Caleb, are you disappointed to hear that it is looking likely Star Trek Beyond might be the last ride for the Kelvin Timeline Enterprise crew?
I'm going to be honest, Alex. I've kind of accepted our fate a little bit. You know, it's been too much pulling of the curtain for too long, and it just doesn't feel like we were ever going to get there anyway. So I'm at peace with it. I would love to have that crew back, but I think this opens the door to, one, bring in new actors, potentially, you know, a revival of other series. That would be cool if they did like a Deep Space Nine follow-up movie, like we just said with Jake Sisko. 5 years post-novel is coming out, so like that would be cool if they did something like that, or maybe revisited another crew, or did something entirely brand new to kind of bring audiences in. I think this Origins film, I'm really curious about if that ever comes to fruition. But the other thing too is, you got Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and Zoe Saldana and Carl Urban. Those are all really big names now who have gone on to do a lot of things in the last 10 years. And this movie, if it was ever going to come, it would not be cheap. And that does not seem like the MO right now for Paramount. They need to get things off the ground quickly, and they have to be wise with their spending while doing it until they can get some more cash flow in. That's my suspicion as to why we've moved on. I just didn't think it was going to happen anyway. So it sucks. You know, it would be great to have another adventure with them, but I'm really happy about the ones we've got. And Star Trek Beyond is a heck of a way to go out. So, you know, I'm at peace.
Yeah, if Star Trek Beyond is where it ends, you know, I mean, so be it, right? It's just, it is what it is. And it has been now, I mean, it's been 9.5 years. It'll very quickly be 10 years since Star Trek Beyond came out. I mean, eventually it's just not feasible. And all of these cast members are very in demand, Hollywood A-list in many cases, or they've got their own TV shows. So it's like, I mean, the chances of just being able to schedule everybody to come back together are not high. And they've clearly struggled to kind of come up with the concept for what is the movie that like continues their story. But I think there's a larger problem there, which is they're sort of trapped with this, like, I mean, what is the Star Trek movie they want to make, right? Like this Star Trek Origin movie that was supposed to be this sort of strip back to basics, like didn't need any previous Star Trek knowledge, like unclear if it's even sort of connected to the prime timeline or if they're just sort of telling a brand new story. I mean, that doesn't seem to be like firing particularly strong excitement meters, because it's been talked about for a year and nothing's happened with it yet. So like, I almost didn't cover this story this week because it's like, you know, I still have my, like, I'm not doing the blow by blows of Star Trek movie stuff because it's just been so disappointing over the last 10 years. But it does feel like it's sort of a pivot moment. But the question is, a pivot moment to what? Because they clearly don't have the like specific idea for how to tell an interesting Star Trek story as a movie and like get this done. And so it's like, what's it going to take, you know, to ultimately get there? I just don't know, you know?
Yeah. And you know, when you look at the movies we do have, even pre-Kelvin, they were spin-offs of the original series and The Next Generation, which were wildly popular. If we're talking about springboarding off of anything, I would think a Strange New Worlds movie after the series comes to its conclusion would be maybe the closest we could get. You know, I don't think of Picard movies in the cards anymore, with the recent announcement that Patrick Stewart's pretty much done acting after this next Avengers movie. So, you know, what would they do? A Discovery movie? I would love a Discovery movie, but do I think that they would go that route? Probably not. I mean, they didn't even want to give Discovery the time of day to truly close its own doors. So I highly doubt that they would want to do a movie for something like Discovery, which, as much as I love it, was very polarizing when it was in its original run. So yeah, I agree with you. I don't know where they want to go with this, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, like they need the big idea. They need the big concept, right? In 2009, they had a big concept. Spock and Kirk and McCoy and you're redoing the original series, and you're going to recast the actors, and you're going to do a little like, sort of something to like honor previous Star Trek, but then you're going to set off in your own direction. And like, I mean, in some ways, maybe that's it, right? Like maybe that's what they need to do, is just say, let's just do another Kirk, Spock, McCoy on the big screen picture, and not have it be Kelvin timeline and not have it be Prime timeline, and just have it be its own thing again. But it feels like they've cycled through a few different ideas of, let's do an original thing, let's do a not original thing, like let's have it be a continuation of something else, let's not have it be a continuation of something else, and just can't seem to land on the thing. Someone once told me their theory was that part of the reason why there had been all these sort of aborted Star Trek movies is that there wasn't really this, before the Skydance merger, they didn't really want to make a Star Trek movie, but Bad Robot deal is that they have to have a Star Trek movie constantly in development in order to keep the rights to it. And so, a project would gestate to the point where it was ready to go, but it was never going to get greenlit. So then it gets trashed, and then they start all over again with a brand new concept. I don't know that I fully believe. I mean, even if that was true in the pre-Skydance era, now they got to take advantage of this. They got to figure out a way to ultimately move it forward. I mean, Paramount wants to significantly expand the number of movies that it's putting in cinemas. Star Trek is an obvious franchise to sort of put into the rotation to do that. But it's just like, when are you going to find the person smart enough to crack the nut of, here's a movie that everybody's going to be excited about, that the studio is ready to put money behind, that's actually going to get made, and then is going to be successful enough on the back end that it leads to something else. And like, for the last 10 years, that just feels like it's the unsolvable equation for Paramount, that they can't fully. Getting Quentin Tarantino doesn't work. Getting Noah Hawley and doing something super original doesn't work. 3 different versions of Star Trek 4 doesn't work. Stripping it back and doing this origin movie doesn't seem to work. Like, where does it land ultimately?
Yeah, I'm not hopeful. And like you said, I was surprised that you chose to cover this as well, because I know how you feel about all the movie news. But yeah, this is just, I mean, if they're setting up Strange New Worlds to end the way they seem to want to end it, you have a TOS cast right there ready to go, right? Like, We don't necessarily need a TOS show, but would a TOS movie be where it would go? I mean, it very well could, and this would be, like we said, early James Kirk before we see him in Where No Man Has Gone Before, right? Like, this is the very beginnings of the Captain, and just a different flavor of Kirk that we got a little bit of in the Kelvin timeline, but that Kirk also went through a great personal tragedy to get to the Captain's chair, right? That's a very different James Kirk than what we've got Paul Wesley doing right now. And yeah, it'd just be really interesting to see if that's where they end up going with it. But I agree, they need a springboard, because what's going to drive people that weren't familiar with Star Trek before to the theater, right? You have the Kelvin movies were successful because Spock is such an omnipresent pop culture icon that people gravitate towards. You want to know what Spock's all about, right? Like, it is the story of Spock as much as it was James Kirk. So I think they need something strong, some big hook, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, is it getting Tom Cruise to play Captain Kirk? Like, is that what it's going to take to ultimately figure out how to move this forward?
I don't know that Tom Cruise in a Star Trek movie would drag in the people we would want to drag into Star Trek. He'd be crazy enough that if we're doing the ship-to-ship orbital jump, we're going to do that in real life, and he's going to actually go to space and do it. And I just don't know if we have the money for that. I just don't know that. Yeah. Ellison has that kind of funds, man.
Yeah. Yeah, the only way that Tom Cruise will do a Star Trek movie is if he can actually do a full EVA
in space.
In space, in the Star Trek spacesuit.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I still feel like in the not too distant future, Skydance has got to make a Star Trek announcement to sort of, indicate the direction of the future of where this is all going. And, we'll cover that when it happens. But yeah, this might be the last, hopefully this will be the last movie story for a while. And I don't necessarily even fully believe that they've fully moved on from the Kelvin timeline, because they've kind of said that before, and then they kept, coming back to it. So we'll just have to see, I suppose. Well, in an interview with Entertainment Weekly that was released a few weeks ago, Star Trek Starfleet Academy showrunners Alex Kurtzman and Noga Landau spoke about the pivotal moment that allowed them to finally crack the decades-long concept of a show set in Starfleet Academy, making the ship part of the school. It's hard to come up with a circumstance and a buy-in where you can still have Star Trek adventures with real stakes and real peril, but it's also a school, Landau said. It's really important that viewers know these kids actually go on real Star Trek missions, and there is real Star Trek peril and complex situations that they have to navigate. The showrunners also discussed the vibe for the show, talking about how they were shooting for an East Coast Ivy League aesthetic for the Starfleet Academy sets. It has trees in it, it looks like a Star Trek vessel, but we've added elements that make it feel alive. The set is 2 levels, Kurtzman said. We built many sets, but what we'll call the atrium is a 2-level set where you could probably have a walk and talk that's 5 pages long and never have to cut. The duo also talked about how important Holly Hunter's role is in the show and why the actress is so key to the show's dynamic. You're sort of talking about the cool mom, Kurtzman describes. It's a very specific voice that you need. She has to have the authority of the captain, but also she needs to be the head of a school and be nurturing in that way, but also tough. She's really in her own category as a captain. Caleb, are you looking forward to Star Trek Starfleet Academy?
Oh, absolutely. I need more Star Trek on my screen. And with Strange New Worlds having ended the 3rd season, we're in this dry spell right now, and I need more Star Trek. I'm really intrigued by this, especially after the most recent round of trailers came out. We got to know a little bit more about the characters and see more about the set. I think this has got a lot of promise to it. I'm really intrigued by the fact that you're going to have Holly Hunter, Tatiana Maslany, and Paul Giamatti all in the second scene of the pilot all together, and that's going to be like the tone setter, at least that they've described in this article. That's going to be kind of crazy. That's a lot of heavy hitters right up front before we really get an introduction to a lot of our other characters, our cadets. But I think it's really cool that it's kind of toes the line between, I think they called it basically like a working hospital, right? It's like you're learning on the job as one would, how else can you best prepare for Starfleet without actually getting your hands dirty and doing it? I think that is a pretty brilliant way of going about it. And so I'm actually kind of excited to see what kind of format we have. If I know it's going to be serialized to a degree, but do we also have some mission of the week kind of vibes at certain points in the season? What is it going to toe the line between the really serialized Discovery predecessor and what we see with Strange New Worlds being more standalone? I don't know, but it feels like it could, if that's really how they're learning their lessons of how to be cadets. So I'm excited. A lot of cool characters coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I do really like the school is also the ship, and the ship goes places, sort of concept for making this work. I think that's a really nice way of sort of putting the show together. Because I do wonder, people have always sort of said, oh yeah, I really want, a Starfleet Academy show, really want to, sort of have this show that's about this school. But I do wonder how much people would actually want that if it's just set planetside at the school and you're not doing a lot of going into space. It feels like the kind of thing that would be fun for 2 or 3 episodes, but maybe wouldn't, beyond that, you'd be a little bit okay, can we get to sort of the Star Trekking here? Because I do think there is that element of a show like Star Trek, even though there have been so many episodes and we as the most hardcore diehard fans are really wanting to see different ways of constructing Star Trek and depicting Star Trek, ultimately I think there is a little bit of you do need to have, somewhat of a, there's certain things that people expect from a Star Trek show. And if you're going to make a Star Trek show, it kind of has to have those things. And one of those things is you go on a ship and you go out and you explore places. And so I do think it would be really interesting to sort of mix those 2 ideas together in the context of Starfleet Academy. Because as I say, right, if it were just Earthbound, as much as people are there are people listening to this right now who are you fucking idiot, absolutely, I want that. And I want 6 seasons of that. And I don't care if they ever went into space. And I fully respect that that's how you feel. I don't know that you would actually feel that way after you watched a few episodes of the show, because it would feel new and different for a little while. And then it would be okay, but this is a Star Trek, right? Like it's Jeff Goldblum on the Jurassic Park tour, right? Like there will eventually be dinosaurs on this tour, right? I mean, like eventually you're expecting that sort of Star Trekky element, and so I think the Athena is a really fun way of balancing between the two, right? Giving you the ability to go and do the Star Trekky things, but also having the school, and the trees and the going between class and all of this stuff. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see how it ultimately shakes out.
And I think with that, the 32nd century is the right setting in this case, because there's a whole swath of technology that's now available through programmable matter and such. Like this ship is a living, breathing thing along with the crew, like this is a whole environment that they've set up. It's got to feel like a school, and a campus to a degree. So I think if you were to try to do this in the 24th century, I don't know that being on a Galaxy class ship would feel like, I'm at school and I'm having fun and I'm learning. Like, I think that's a very different, that's the hotel in space rather than the teaching hospital in space, right. So very, very different vibes. I think this is the right vibe for what I think they want the show to be.
And just the fact that like a piece of the ship can detach and go land on the planet and then take off again and, sort of dock with the rest of the ship and the nacelles so it can warp off into, off to its next mission. Like that's very much a detached nacelles type, like thing, in that it sort of feels like it really only works in the context of what we know about how 32nd century ships function versus like 24th century ships. Like, it just feel clunky if it was, the Voyager saucer, like, lands and then takes off again and lands and takes off again. Like that doesn't quite feel right. And that doesn't feel right for sort of like 24th century Star Trek, the idea that would happen. But it does feel right in some ways, because who knows what's right or not, because we're in, we're in this sort of far future for the first time. So we kind of get to decide what the dynamics of it are, but it feels right, that it would happen in this context, in this far future setting.
Absolutely. And I think, too, we only did get a little bit of flavor of the 32nd century. I know we had 3 seasons of Discovery there, but that was very much in the background of the stories that were driving those seasons up until the 5th season, where it felt like we really were starting to get some more 32nd century lore, and there's just a lot of untapped potential here that we've got a little bit of dabbling in. And it's like you said, there's a wide open canvas, I think, with which they can paint this story on. So I'm excited.
Yeah, because I think in that respect, Discovery did play it safe's not quite the right way of putting it, but they defined the 32nd century only insofar as it was necessary to tell the story that they were trying to tell in Discovery. Like they didn't sort of pop off and see different bits of it or do things, or it's like, we're going to do this thing because it sort of shows you the 32nd century world. It was like, we're telling this Discovery story, and either a piece of information about the 32nd century is relevant to that story or it isn't. And if it's not relevant, we don't have time or the inclination to do it, which is sort of how you should do it, right? Like, especially when you're telling that serialized story, you don't want to go on too many side quests just for the purposes of world building. But I think the flip side of that is for Starfleet Academy, it does give them the chance to do more of that world building, and you would expect them to do more of that world building, because the other key difference between Starfleet Academy and Discovery, which is sort of similar to the difference between Deep Space Nine and The Next Generation, is even though, as we were just talking about, they have access to a ship that's going to take them around the universe, ultimately they are like, it's a place-based show, it's San Francisco is where the school is. So even if you are going off and doing missions, you're ultimately coming back to that one location, which is technically your home and where you're supposed to be located. And so the more time you spend there, the more of it you see, and the more layers of the onion you start to peel back, and the more you're hopefully going to see things like, how do people in the 32nd century, right? What does civilian life look like? And what's it like to be in a city 1,000 years in the future? And so the show has much more freedom and flexibility to go deeper into some of that stuff.
And a lot of Discovery, it was a crew not from the 32nd century learning how to interact with the 32nd century, whereas now these are people who have grown up and lived here. Like, this is their world. And so I think that's a really different dynamic too, except with, Tig Notaro's character Jet Reno being there. I think that's, and I guess the Doctor, but the Doctor's very malleable. I mean, he's the most impressive hologram to ever live, right? So it'll be really interesting to see how the cadets develop. And I'm really attracted by the fact that a lot of the actors they've casted are very green themselves. And the lead character, Caleb Meir, is right out of acting school, never been on camera before. And I think that's really interesting. It's like this guy's learning how to perform in a certain way as his character is also learning how to perform in a certain way. And I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic to explore. So I'm excited to see how he does,
Well, after the Star Trek Day tease that LEGO would be releasing its first Star Trek product, we now have the full announcement for LEGO's first foray into Star Trek, a 3,600-piece model of the USS Enterprise D from Star Trek The Next Generation. Launching on Black Friday, that's November the 28th, the set will retail for $400 and when complete will measure about 2 feet in length. In addition to the model of the Enterprise D, complete with saucer separation, of course, the set also comes with minifigures with accessories of The Next Generation's major characters, including Captain Picard, Commander Riker, Data, Worf, Geordi, Troy, Dr. Crusher, Wesley Crusher, and Guinan. And if you purchase the set from Lego.com or in person at a Lego store between November 28th and December 1st, you will receive a free limited edition set of a Type 15 Shuttlepod, along with a minifigure of Ensign Ro Laren. Caleb, will you be picking up the new Lego Icons Enterprise D set when it releases in 3 weeks?
I absolutely will. I'm really excited about this. Previously to Lego doing this, the Blue Brick sets from Germany were really, really impressive, but I did not get to partake in much of that. I only have the Deep Space Nine model that they did, and I really, really am excited that an actual Lego brand of Star Trek Lego is coming to us, and it's the minifigures really is what's doing it for me. I like this. They did such a great job with Geordi and Worf and on all of them and their accessories. Honestly, that I'm very excited for the fact that we get to have some of our favorite crew members, in Lego form. The ship itself looks pretty great. I really like the stand. I like that it does a saucer separation. It's not perfect. I have my nitpicks, as every Trekkie does. I'm sure there are lots of people that will nitpick both the top, the bottom, the dish, everything from port to starboard, on this thing. But I think it looks really good for the very first foray into Star Trek Lego, and it's a pretty big size too. Obviously it's meant for display, but I am definitely gonna pick this up because I want more Star Trek Lego. And if this does well, there could be more icon sets. And would you like to have a Defiant Lego at some point with Miles and Jadzia and Cisco? And I think I would love that. Don't you? I mean, that's just the way I want to go with things. So
yeah, I am sort of surprised by the negativity of the reaction to this. A lot of people have been very critical of the way it looks. And as somebody who went into it when they announced they were doing Lego Star Trek and it leaked out it was going to be the Enterprise D, Lego doesn't do curved, round, flat things well. It's just not one, because these are square bricks. It's just not my sort of reaction is throughout this whole last week of people reacting to, first of all, the leaked pictures and then the actual announcement pictures is what did you expect it to look like? I mean, it's a Lego set. They've got studs on them, and the angles are always going to be a little bit weird because they're ultimately Lego pieces. If you want a model of the Enterprise D that's flawlessly shaped like a model of the Enterprise D, buy the Eaglemoss model or go buy an ANT kit. The 1 to 1400 scale Enterprise D. It's not as big as the Lego set will be. That one's only about I think 13, 14 inches long. But I mean, that's what you get an Enterprise D that looks just like an Enterprise D. Otherwise, you're buying a Lego set. It's going to look like a Lego set, and it does look like a Lego set. And actually, in my opinion, as the person who was most oh, I don't think as a Lego set this is going to look any good, and so it's probably not going to be for me, because that's how I felt about I bought the Blue Bricks shuttles, the Runabout and the Delta Flyer, because it had the full interior, and I thought that was really cool. But I took a pass on all of the big ships because I was to me, these look weird because they look like Lego sets. They don't look like the ships. But actually, for me, seeing this, I'm like, it looks pretty good. Like, I ended up being happier with it as someone who was much more skeptical of the idea of Lego Star Trek in the first place than a lot of people who were like, there's nothing I want more in the world than Lego Star Trek, and now I've seen it and are like, no, but not this. So it's that's sort of been a bit strange because I'm just like, I don't know what people expected other than what it is, given what Lego sets look like in all other circumstances where Lego's doing something that's flat and round and curved. They do squares really well. You could do a house looks really good as a Lego set because it's a square. So it's just small bricks that make something that looks like a bigger brick. But like they've always struggled with these sort of pieces, and Lego also, when they make a set, they will make some new pieces, but they're not going to make a lot of like unique pieces just to the set. That's the beauty of Lego. They have this sort of library of pieces they can pull from to sort of build all of this stuff. It's what makes the whole thing possible and makes it a $400 set as opposed to $1,000 set. But a lot of people are like, well, like, oh, there should be more with the windows and like, the sort of unique details of the starship. And it's like, when's Lego ever going to be able to use anything like that again? Like if you're making a lot of sort of specific enterprise, and eventually it's just like, well, then it shouldn't be a Lego set. It should be a model kit, and like so it is just very. I think it looks great. I think the initial angles that were showed of it were a little unfair because the Enterprise D. I love the Enterprise D more than anything in the world. It's my favorite ship in all of Star Trek. Its most flattering angle is not taken a picture from the front from below.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what was initially showed. And it's like, are you seeing that it looks like a crap model set, or are you just seeing the Enterprise D's worst angle? And I think it's a little more of the latter than the former. So yeah, I think I'm going to get this. Partially just because I think, if they do only end up making one, or if they make very few, I think there's going to be a FOMO connected to people who are initially like, I'm not buying that. And then 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now are like, oh my God, I would do anything to get the Lego Enterprise D sets.
And then you get the really unhinged people on the forums and the Facebook groups who are, bidding thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Yes. So I'm going to buy it as an investment vehicle.
Yeah. I will say the nacelles, they did an absolutely bang up job with those. I mean, the nacelles look great. Like, talk about the curves, that they got that part 100%. I mean, I think every angle of those warp nacelles just look beautiful. Again, I agree with you. They did a really good job for the fact that, yes, it's Lego, right? Like, there are some things that they're just not going to be able to do for something that is possibly a limited run. Lego Icons is a one-off that could become more if it sells well. But I think, we were talking with some friends about how some of the Lord of the Rings sets started as Icons one-offs, and then they, brought in a couple of more sets on top of that after those sold well. I think if they're going to have one that sells well, the Enterprise D is one that I think will sell fairly well for a first Star Trek set. It's iconic, and the fact that all of the crew is represented is a big draw for a lot of people. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with what some of the minifigures go for on eBay and whatnot, but some sets that have these exclusive figures go for quite a lot. Even like one of the original Boba Fett figures, I think, goes for like hundreds of dollars or something ridiculous. So I think this is, like you said, it's a good investment vehicle on top of just a really cool display. And I'm just impressed that they made the saucer separate. Like, they didn't have to do that. It happens twice in the show. The fact that they even did that is cool for something that is supposed to just be a static model. So sign me up.
Yeah. So Black Friday, this releases $400. If you want the Shuttlepod, it's like 200 pieces to build the Shuttlepod and the Ensign Row. You have to buy it either on Lego.com or at a Lego store. You can't buy it from any other outlet between November 28th and December 3rd. I mean, you can buy it from any other outlet. You just can't get the shuttle with it. If you want the shuttle too, you got to buy that between Black Friday, November 28th and December 1st. Lego.com.
Don't forget, there's also the Lego Inside Insiders members have the possibility of winning an autographed set from Jonathan Frakes as well.
That's right. If you don't want to haul your set to Las Vegas to have Frakes sign it, and you just want one shipped to you with Frakes' signature, yes, there's a drawing for LEGO Insider members. Well, and lastly this week, Lakeshore Records have released a full soundtrack for the score of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3. The 45-track soundtrack for Season 3 features music from the season's full 10 episodes and can be listened to through all major streaming platforms or purchased digitally. But wait, I hear you asking, there's been a score release for Season 1 and now for Season 3, so what about Season 2? Well, unfortunately, Lakeshore Records has informed TrekCore that there are no plans for an additional Season 2 release beyond the Subspace Rhapsody soundtrack released last year that had all the songs from the musical episode. Caleb, have you listened yet to any of the Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3 soundtrack?
I have. I've done almost the entire thing. I made it through, I think, track 36 or 37 out of 45. So I think it was the Skygowan is the Limit was the last one I listened to. So I guess that Skygowan, I think that was the finale, right? The planet they went down on. Yeah.
New life for new civilizations.
So it's good. I think I would like to commend Nami Melamad for putting together a really interesting order for the track listings. Like, I think this is very much an album as much as it is a soundtrack. The titles are always quite the trip. I do enjoy the puns and some of the cutesy references that come for some of the track titles. My one little gripe is that some of these tracks being so new, and some of the episodes still also being so new, I'm having a hard time picking out what track goes with which episode. And I can't help but think if this was a physical release, right, you would have liner notes in the album or on the vinyl that would say like, oh, you know, these tracks are from this episode or this episode. There'd be some sort of tag somewhere so you at least know and don't have to go hunting for it. And that's my one little gripe, because it's kind of random, right? We start off with Doug Sees Doug, which is from, 4.5 Vulcans, and we jump all over to Terrarium, and then back to Wedding Bell Blues, and then back to Hegemony, and then it's like it just hops all over the place on this record. And so, some of those are easy to pick out based on title. Some of them I'm like, I have no idea what this, is referencing, and I don't have the time to go back and watch Season 3 to figure out where that cue came from, if I really liked it and how that impacted that particular scene. But I'm really enjoying the soundtrack. I think on first listen, I like it a lot more than Season 1. I think Season 1 was still a lot of discovery of what does Nami want Strange New Worlds to sound like? Yeah. What's the fine line between referencing TOS too much or too little? And here it just feels like a really good balance. And so I like a lot of the motifs that they brought in here. So it definitely, I think, high up on my Strange New World ranks. But I'm bummed about the Season 2 one, because I thought that was really good too. And I wish that we had some of those cues as well. But alas.
Yeah, the Season 2 thing is crazy as far as I'm concerned. That does not make any sense to me at all, that they're not going to release the Season 2 one. I mean, I guess they have their reasons, otherwise they would do it, but they all sound like dumb reasons to me. It's just weird. It's weird. It's weird that you release Season 1, and it's weird that you release Season 3. I get the musical episode being its own standalone release, but that's not the Season 2 release. The Season 2 release is the Season 2 release. The Subspace Rhapsody release is the Subspace Rhapsody release. So where's Season 2? Having said that, Season 3, great soundtrack. I probably listened to it 3 times today because I had some writing to do, and so I had it on, in my headphones while I was doing that. And I really like it. I'm actually shocked in a good way how little referencing other Star Trek kind of music there is. Like, there's a few, da 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 da, but like just a couple of those. I mean, it's definitely nothing like the Picard Season 3 soundtracks, which I also love, but are just like chock full of that stuff, right? Like chock full of, here's your Voyager motif, and here's your Next Generation motif, and here's your Jerry Goldsmith Klingon motif. Like, the Strange New Worlds soundtrack has really a large amount of original Star Trek music in it, which is nice. It's a different approach, but it's one that I really appreciate. But also, you're absolutely right. Like, Strange New Worlds and this would be even clearer if there was a season 2 release, has its own very strongly distinct musical identity now. Like the Pike theme, for example. I love the Pike theme. And it's on the album a lot because it's in the season a lot. And every time I'm just like, yeah, the Pike, I love the Pike theme. The like it's that. So like, it's as a show, it has its own, as I say, it has its own identity. And I do really like that. And I like the themes, and it sort of solidifies for me that my favorite Star Trek composer from the new era by a pretty significant margin is Nami Melamed. I mean, she just does incredible work, and I love the Strange New World stuff. I love the Prodigy stuff. She's not afraid to kind of pull in the familiar motifs, but the new stuff that she creates feels right on theme with sort of Star Trek music as a whole. And yes, I'm really happy with it. And I'd be even happier if there was a season 2 release.
Hear, hear. We need the full thing. I mean, and on that note also, right, like we still are missing some Lower Decks. We're missing some Prodigy season 2 stuff. Like there's no reason in this digital age we can't have it all. And for the completists, for all things music and Star Trek music, I think it's fair to demand that. Like there's a market there. And I don't know what the holdup is.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's offer our opinions on the Star Trek franchise.
Your opinion has been noted. Anything further?
So as we transition from the news section to the opinion section, each week my guests and I will give you a Star Trek opinion, wish, or theory we're nurturing that week about any aspect of the Star Trek franchise we want to opine on. So Caleb, let's hear it. What's your big Star Trek opinion for this week?
Oh, my big Star Trek opinion. I keep looking at the calendar and I'm thinking like we're about to be into 2026 and
2 months till Starfleet Academy premieres.
And we've got Starfleet Academy coming. And of course, we've got Strange New Worlds season 4, but then you've got season 5 wrapping up. And conveniently, whenever season 5 airs, it also probably is going to be pretty close to 2027, which is also when Kurtzman's contract ends. And I just want to know what David Ellison's plans are for Star Trek. Are we going to have a new showrunner? Are we going to extend contracts? Are we going to greenlight some of these other things? I want to know what the next step is. And I know it's so early, but I still can't help feeling that, we have a slate ahead, but then a whole lot of unknown. And I want to be able to rely on Star Trek for the next several years, and that's the backbone of what keeps me going as much as I know it keeps you going. So I think we should extend some contracts and figure out how to keep the people making good Star Trek in place to continue making more Star Trek. Right? That's my opinion.
Yeah, there is still there is such a question mark about where do things go from here. I mean, so far everything's been positive, right? Like it's not like the new team came in and the media saying, oh yeah, they're ready to put Star Trek in a box and bury it underneath the ground. This isn't Les Moonves taking over CBS in 2003 and that very quickly with the departure of, God, I'm blanking on his name, the CBS executive who was like the huge Star Trek fan who, had been the one to just be like, more Star Trek, more Star Trek, more Star Trek, when Les Moonves came in and he just like didn't get the Star Trek thing and didn't care to know about it, very quickly shuffled Enterprise off after that happened. Like, it's not that, all the signs we've gotten have been very positive, but it is a little bit like, yeah, like I really would like to kind of know what the contours of the future we're moving into are. And I was sort of expecting we would get a little more of that by now, but we haven't. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. What do I know how long it takes to do that kind of thing, right? Like, I'm just guessing and just being a fanboy. But yeah, like I would like to know some sense of direction. So far, the only sense of direction I've really gotten is Star Trek is important, but that's not going to be the Kelvin timeline cast for the movies. Okay, so like, what else, right? Like, where are we going? Where is this ultimately? Big picture. What's the next phase for the Star Trek franchise? Is it more of the same, right? Like, is it Starfleet Academy 3 and 4, and then a TOS show to replace Strange New Worlds? Is it ditching Kurtzman and getting bring in a new franchise showrunner to kind of, reinvigorate the franchise and take it in a different direction. I don't necessarily know. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of that, right? Like it'd be different, but it fresh new ideas, fresh perspectives, be tolerant, right? Like, was that the Kirk line from Star Trek 3? So I agree with you. It'd be nice to get some sense of where do they want to take the Star Trek franchise from here.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely, it's something that, like you said, compared to Les Moonves, we know that Ellingson's a big Star Trek fan. Like, we're gonna have something, but what? And is Paramount Plus still the route they want to go? Like, are we going to see a swing back to more stuff on cable? Like, is there an actual different, like, is there another medium in which we're going to start seeing Star Trek beyond, a streamer? I don't know. Is the movie is certainly a possibility, but I just want to know, or at least just have some news that there's some things greenlit and that we've got more stuff coming. I'm really enjoying rewatching what I've got, but I'm all for new stuff, especially with the ever shaping world around us. We've got a world where AI is very much, climbing up the ranks, and you've got these tech companies that are trying to change the entire world's relationship with AI. And not that I want more AI stories in my Star Trek, but it's a very different world now than it was in 2017 when Discovery came on air, So what do they want to tell with Star Trek? What do they want to comment on? I think that is a really important aspect of Star Trek, is just the allegory to what's going on in the present world. And there's a lot that I don't feel like a lot of Strange New Worlds has really gotten into commentary on what's going on around us as much as it is just trying to tell some really good stories in universe. But I think there's opportunities there to comment on the world around us. And maybe that's what Starfleet Academy's goal is to do, resonate with the generation that's growing up right now, in this very fast changing world. And that's what, some of the previous articles we've read have indicated. But beyond that, what else is there? So
yeah,
we'll have to see.
We will have to see. All right, let me give you my opinion for this week. And really, I want to use this opportunity to revisit conversation from 2 episodes ago, which is about Star Trek Con, because Star Trek Con has now finished. And in the episode, it wasn't 2 weeks ago, but 2 episodes ago, probably 6 weeks ago, with Carl Wonders, talked about how much I was enjoying Star Trek Con, was really high on it at that point. I think it was like 3 or 4 episodes in. It's now finished, and I wanted to kind of revisit how I felt about it, because I, had talked about it like when it was somewhat the way through, and did write a review for TrekCore.com. So I've got these sort of thoughts are also in written format. In the end, I really liked it. I didn't end up liking it as much as I was liking it halfway through. It ended up being a little long at 9 episodes, and I don't want to talk too much about I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but like, there were elements of the show where it kind of fell a little bit into the prequel curse of, because what happened between Space Seed and the Wrath of Khan, the only way to kind of make it interesting is to throw something really unexpected at you. And the show does that. And it was okay, but I didn't like love it. And there is this big twist right at the end, which I actually did like a lot more. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it the whole way through, and definitely as like a proof of concept for doing more Star Trek audio dramas. Yes, let's do it. But I'd never been super interested in the Space Seed to Wrath of Khan story, because I think, as I said before, like, Khan tells you everything you need to know about what happens in those years in the first scene in Wrath of Khan. And this story didn't entirely dissuade me of that sort of original perspective, but I did really enjoy it for what it was. The twist was very affecting. And like, I ended the show feeling quite emotional. In like a way that I wasn't expecting. And the sort of framing story with George Takei as Sulu and Tim Russ as Tuvok. At the beginning of the show, it feels like a gimmick. Hey, let's just get, we can get Sulu and Tuvok back. But actually, by the end of the show, the framing narrative actually ties into the story of Khan in a really interesting way that I won't spoil, but like, was really nice. So it's like, so I end, sort of with some mixed emotions about it. Most primarily that I really enjoyed listening to it, and I'm really glad I listened to it, and I had a great time listening to it, but also just with that general feeling of it kind of suffered from that prequel curse of, and in some ways it's not really even a prequel. It's like filling in a gap between two existing stories, but you know where it starts and you know where it ends. So ultimately the story is what the story is. And when super different things or weird things happen, you're always like, okay, but it's got to get back to this place where I know that it ends on. So like, how does that happen? And I really hope they do another Star Trek audio drama with a completely original story, because I think then that would really unlock the potential of this medium.
It's really interesting that you say that it's a gap filler, but a gap filler can still also be done really well and have a lot of impact. I'm going to pull Pike's story, for example, right? Like Through the Valley of the Shadows and that whole arc in Discovery season 2 is a gap filler for Pike's story, as is much of this, Strange New World show is, but it has completely changed the context of what we knew about that character between, the cage and the menagerie, right? And it's been done so well. But something like this, I agree with you. I don't know that it's necessary. And unless it's done really, really well and knocked out of the park, at the end of the day, it's just leaves you right where you're at before. Like, I don't feel that way with what we've done with Pike, in Strange New Worlds. I feel like we're going to get to the end of the show and we're going to feel very different about Pike than what we did pre-Strange New Worlds, right? So I haven't listened to Khan yet. It's on my list. I was waiting for it to actually finish so I could do it all at once. But it's also not a story I'm jumping to get at, because I also don't love Khan a whole lot, like the Khan story we got is what I've lived with forever. And I'm just like, okay, Khan's not even one of my favorite villains, I have to admit. So he's an excellent villain, but not my favorite. And so it's not something I'm jumping at. So I agree with you, but I would love to do more audio dramas and have something original, because I think it's a really interesting medium and allows you, much like Lower Decks, allows you to tell stories without really breaking the budget. And it's a really interesting way to tell the stories too.
I will say, Naveen Andrews does a really phenomenal Khan. It's a really excellent performance. And the part of the show that I enjoyed the most, like the choices that he makes are really interesting. And I'm really glad they cast him for it. And if his performance hadn't been as good, like some of the flaws in the story would have come through even more strongly. But to the extent there are sort of story choices that feel a little kind of ropey, it's carried on the back of a really phenomenal Khan performance from Naveen Andrews.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I had not seen Naveen Andrews in anything prior, so I'm pretty green to that casting, and it's good to hear. You're not the first person I've heard say that either, so it's good to hear that he was pretty effective in the role. So I'm gonna get on board soon.
Do you have an opinion, theory, or wish about Star Trek that you'd like to share? Email them to me at weeklytrek@trekcore.com, and I might feature your thoughts in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Caleb Dorsch, for joining me today. Caleb, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
I have not been as active recently, but I am still on Blue Sky at ROGUEMOGH. That's Rogue Mogue at Blue Sky. bsky.social, I guess. So you can follow along with my Enterprise rewatch and all my thoughts regarding that. I'll see you out there.
And you can find this show on X at Weekly Trek, and me at Alexander T. Perry on X, and at Alex T. Perry on Blue Sky, and everywhere else. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And for all your Star Trek news needs, in addition to our extensive media archives of all things Star Trek, I hope you will keep your senses locked to TrekCore.com. Well, thank you, Caleb. Thank you to all of my listeners. Until next week, live long and prosper. Weekly Trek is a production of TrekCore.com and owned by Trapezoid Media, LLC.